What's going on, guys? Today I bring you my favorite bleed build. I've tried just about every setup for bleed, and while there are definitely multiple ways to do it, this one works best for me. You're going to get some amazing damage from mods, very high crit and weak spot damage with the guns, and a fun and easy way to heal up. If you want to get some really big damage numbers while staggering even bosses, then this is something you need to try. Be aware I cannot properly test this at the fire range because the dummies don't bleed, and a lot of our crit comes from bleeding the enemy first. For your prime class, you want Gunslinger. This grants 25% more range damage, some crit, and most importantly, 20% faster reload speed when our magazine is empty. Also, using your skill reloads your gun. Let me tell you, our main gun has one of the worst reloads in the game as far as I'm concerned, so this really helps out. For your skill, you want Bullet Storm. This massively increases damage by granting 20% increased fire rate and 50% faster reload speed. Lasting a long time, this skill keeps you dealing damage as long as possible. As your subclass, you want Archon. This grants a huge boost to both mod damage and mod crit chance, also generating our mods over time for a bit. This class doesn't help our gun much at all, but it does make sure our mod is going to hit for thousands of damage at a time. Not usually a good pairing with Gunslinger, but in this particular case, it works. For your skill, you can do you depending on the situation, as Archon has some pretty mid-tier skills. I chose Chaos Gate as it grants more damage, better mod regen, and fits the theme of the build with the red look. However, this skill also makes you take more damage, and can really kill your frame rate, especially when playing in co-op. It's pretty powerful, but it's not going to kill you if you don't run it. As for the armor, I like Field Medic Mask, Realm Walker Tunic, Night Stalker Pants, and Survivor Gloves. A mess of gear, I agree, but it has a great look, and the mask seemed appropriate for playing into a bleed theme. For the Relic, I chose Tranquil Heart. When running DPS, it's hard to survive hits, and if you do, it's even harder to get a heal off. This Relic passively regens our health, so we never need to take a Relic, and can stay laser focused on the fight. As for Relic Fragments, go with Ranged Crit Chance, range crit damage, and weak spot damage. This is a standard setup for weak spot crit, which is some of the highest damage you can deal in the game. Also, this seems to apply to one of our mods in particular, of which we'll be talking about soon. Our main gun will be Merciless. Now, this is a very powerful weapon for damage, as it applies bleeding and can easily get some nice crit at a consistent rate. Problem is, the reload on it is horrendous. Truly an awful reload that takes at least 5 seconds and will ruin gameplay. Because we took Gunslinger, it becomes usable, and we don't have to use it 24/7 because its mod is our main damage source anyway. But be aware, without Gunslinger, this gun is not worth your time. Now, its mod, that's called Bloodline on the other hand, is easily one of the most powerful mods in the game, being able to hit high crit and weak spot with insane stagger. It is like launching a streamlined hammer straight at your foe's face. Using it will knock everything back instantly. In the case of the Brain Boss, crush its defenses quickly. Also, when it hits an enemy, it will deal more damage to the next enemy it hits. This only works if you penetrate multiple foes at a time, but in some instances, I've gotten over 6,000 damage from firing it through 2 enemies and into the boss. Bloodline's extremely powerful, and because we're using it with Archon, it comes back in seconds and can be incredible. For the mutator, run Momentum. You might immediately be thinking, oh wait, isn't there a bleed mutator to apply double stacks of bleed? Yes, and you don't want to use it with this specific build. I played with that setup for a while and never got near as much damage as I did here. Regardless of what the numbers happen to say, Momentum was better by miles. This is largely due to us focusing on crit rather than damage from the bleed itself. For your melee, you want the Assassin's Dagger. I never melee unless I'm using a melee specific build, so it won't matter much if you don't use it. But the thing gets bonus damage on bleeding targets, thus fitting the theme. Also, it looks great on your backpack, which is all I really care about. The Mutator Vampire Blade seems appropriate here as well. For your sidearm, I have a sort of odd choice, but I promise it's well selected. This is Sorrow, a mini crossbow that fires with precision. Now, this guy's pretty confusing, as it doesn't feel that great normally. Essentially, it works in tandem with its mod to give consistent healing and infinite ammo. At least with Archon equipped. So the gun fires 5 bullets at a time. Once all of the bullets or bolts are fired, you can use the mod to retract them out of the target. You will then receive 5 additional bolts in the next magazine without reloading. Retracted bolts also grant you health. Since we're running Archon, you can loop this so that you never reload the weapon and heal over time. Also, this gun just automatically has a nice reload. Just wait for the mod to deactivate before firing again and it becomes extremely reliable. Also, since it gets 10% crit chance and 115% weak spot damage, it's going to have some crazy high damage for a sidearm. Pair it with Twisting Wounds, as will already be bleeding targets. You get a good damage bonus and can now apply that second stack of bleed we talked about earlier. Yes, you do need to switch weapons to apply it, but both weapons offer solid damage anyway. Also, because our mod damage is so high from Archon, retracting the bolts will deal significant damage, especially if you have more bolts on one target. I was very surprised by how efficient this gun felt as a bleed weapon, and the healing is actually able to fully heal you at times. This gives us some great synergy between weapons, and both have mods that can devastate opponents, which is what we want. As for the Amulet and Rings, we want high damage. Abrasive Whetstone grants 15% crit chance and 30% increased crit damage to bleeding targets. No matter what we shoot, we'll be bleeding the target, and this is one of the highest damage boosts that you can get for crit. It essentially guarantees that we crit more often than not. Xania's Malice increases weak spot damage by up to 30%, an easy damage boost that helps take down bosses faster. I'd recommend switching this off if you cannot hit a particular boss's weak spot, but not running it seems to lower damage a lot otherwise. Akari Warband grants 15% increased crit chance and 15% increased crit damage after perfect dodging. This is always active in combat, especially in boss fights. Probability Cord is in so many builds, as its massive 30% increased crit damage is very strong. Lastly, I have Burden of the Destroyer, 15% increase to all damage while reducing firearm range by 25%. The range isn't that important for either of these weapons, and this is an easy way to buff mods, bleed, and weapon damage all at the same time. Altogether, we're going to get guaranteed crit in combat, and that crit is going to be cutting down bosses easily. This also makes sure that the mod on our main gun called Bloodline hits for weak spot crit over 4,000 damage at a time. As for traits, we want some better survivability since we don't have damage reduction. Ammo reserves increases ammo by 50%, which is good since our main gun eats through it quickly. Flashcaster helps increase mod casting speed and skill casting speed so we can fire them off rapidly during damage phases. Triage increases healing by 50%, so our crossbow mod works well, and so our relic healing over time is a bit better. Vigor, endurance, spirit, and expertise, of which you always need, and then fitness is essential as it gets you out of an attack range much faster. It's a very nice way to avoid damage when running lighter armor. Lastly, we want Siphoner as it does fit the theme. You can of course switch this out as it's the most expendable, but I love it here. One additional thing to grab is Strong Drink Concoctions. They reduce encumbrance by 10, which is what allows us to have the fast dodges in this medium armor set. Fast dodge is just way superior in every way to medium. It's not even a close comparison. As for how to use the build, you have this checklist. Fire off your weapon to bleed the enemy. Use the mod on Merciless against weak spots to shred health. Switch over to the crossbow to stick some bolts in and apply more bleed. Get damage from the mod and retract for more ammo. Switch back to your main gun and activate Bulletstorm to avoid reloading. Rinse and repeat. The Chaos Gate skill is there to give you more damage if you need it, and you can continue this cycle avoiding the sucky reload of Merciless while spamming its mod when you have on bleed. Make sure that bleed is active before using the mod, as it helps guarantee the high crit damage. All I know is I absolutely hate Merciless, and this build got me to use it. That's how strong the setup really is. Do try it if you're interested in bleed builds and see what you think. So that's the bleed setup that I landed on after trying many number of things. Hopefully you enjoy it, and I think it's got some nice damage. Depending on boss affixes, elemental damage can be hit or miss, but that mod damage from Merciless is crazy. This is another build that can work well against the last boss, thankfully, as there don't seem to be many of those. Good luck siphoning the life from your enemies, and I'll catch you next time.